Biographical sketch of Miss Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield. Hope is a better companion than fear. Providence, ever benignant and kind, gives with a smile what you take with a tear. All will be right. Look to the light. Morning was ever the daughter of night. All that was black will be all that is bright. Cheerily, cheerily, then cheer up. Miss Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, or the Black Swan, to adopt her musical agnomen, was born at Natchez, Mississippi. She was born in bondage. Her father was a full African, white and Indian blood flowed in her mother's veins. When but 1 year old, her mistress, Mrs. Elizabeth Greenfield, removed to Philadelphia and joined the Society of Friends, manumitting the few slaves whom she had not previously accompanied and comfortably settled in Liberia. Several of these would not be separated from their beloved and venerated mistress, and among them her especial favorite, the gifted subject of these pages. In 1844, her mistress died at the advanced age of nearly 100 years, and in her will Elizabeth was remembered by a substantial legacy, sufficient to make her comfort for life. But the will was contested, and yet remains the subject of judicial investigation. Previous to the death of her mistress, Elizabeth had become distinguished in the limited circle in which she was known for her remarkable power of voice. Its tender and thrilling tones often lightened the weight of age in one who was to her beloved as a mother. How deeply she grieved that she could receive no culture from art, neither the remarkable compass of her voice, nor the wonder of her high and low notes, nor the proffer of $30 per quarter, when the standard price was 10, could induce a professor to include her among his pupils. The admission of a colored pupil would have jeopardized his success. By indomitable perseverance, she surmounted difficulties almost invincible. At first, she taught herself crude accompaniments to her songs, and intuitively perceiving the agreement or disagreement of them, improvised and repeated, until there was heard floating upon the air a very lovely song of one that had a pleasant voice, and could play well upon a guitar. There dwelt in the neighborhood of Mrs. Greenfield a physician, humane and courteous, capable, too, of distinguishing and appreciating merit and genius, under whatever prejudices and disadvantages they were presented. His daughter, herself an amateur in the science of harmonious sounds, heard of Elizabeth's peculiar structure of mind. Miss Price invited her to her house. She listened with delighted surprise to her songs. She offered to accompany her upon the guitar. This was a concurrence of circumstances which formed the era of her life. Her pulses quickened as she stood and watched the fair Anglo-Saxon fingers of her young patroness run over the keyboard of a full-toned pianoforte, eliciting sweet, sad, sacred, solemn sounds. Emotion well-nigh overcame her, but the gentle encouragement of her fair young friend dissipated her fears and increased her confidence. She sung, and before she had finished, she was surrounded by the astonished inmates of the house, who, attracted by the remarkable compass and sweetness of her voice, stealthily entered the room, and now, unperceived, stood gathered behind her. The applause which followed the first trial before this small but intelligent audience gratified as much as it embarrassed her from the unexpected and sudden surprise. She not only received an invitation to repeat her visit, but Miss P, for a reasonable compensation, undertook her instruction in the first rudiments of music. The progress of genius is not like that of common minds. It is needless to say that her improvement was very rapid. Her kind mistress lived to see her become an object of musical interest to the widening circle of her acquaintance. She began to receive invitations to entertain private parties by the exhibition of the gift which the God of nature had bestowed upon her. She proffered its aid to advance the cause of various charities and on benefit occasions. Upon the death of her mistress, in consequence of the contested will, she found herself thrown upon her own resources for a maintenance. Remembering some friends in the western part of New York, she resolved to visit them. While crossing Lake Seneca en route to Buffalo, there came sweetly stealing upon the senses of the passengers of the steamer, her rich, full, round, clear voice, unmarred by any flaw. The lady passengers, especially the noble Mrs. Gen P, feeling that the power and sweetness of her voice deserved attention, urged her to sing again, and were not satisfied until 5 or 6 more songs were given to them. Before reaching their destined port, she had made many friends. The philanthropic Mrs. Gen P. became her friend and patroness. She at once invited Elizabeth to her splendid mansion in Buffalo, and learning her simple story, promptly advised her to devote herself entirely to the science of music. During her visit, a private party was given by this lady, to which all the elite of the city were invited. Elizabeth acquitted herself so admirably that 2 days after a card of invitation came to her through the public press, signed by the prominent gentlemen of Buffalo, requesting her to give a series of concerts. She sang before the Buffalo Musical Association, and her performances were received with marks of approbation from the best musical talent in the city that established her reputation as a songstress. "Give the Black Swan," said they, "the cultivation and experience of the fair Swede or Emdal parody, and she will rank favorably with those popular singers who have carried the nation into captivity by their rare musical abilities. Her voice has a full round sound and is of immense compass and depth. She strikes every note in a clear and well-defined manner and reaches the highest capacity of the human voice with wonderful ease and apparently an entire want of exertion. Beginning with G in the bass clef, she runs up the scale to E in the treble clef and gives each note its full power and tone. She commences at the highest note and runs down the scale with the same ease that she strikes any other lower note. The fact that she accomplishes this with no apparent exertion is surprising and fixes at once the marvelous strength of her vocal organs. Her voice is wholly natural and, as might be expected, lacks the training and exquisite cultivation that belongs to the skillful Italian singer. But the voice is there, and as a famous maestro once said, "It takes 100 things to make a complete singer, of which a good voice is 99. If this be so, Miss Greenfield is on the verge of excellence, and it remains for the public to decide whether she shall have the means to pursue her studies." To several gentlemen in Buffalo belongs the credit of having first brought out Miss Greenfield in the concert room. The Buffalo papers took the matter in hand and assured the public they had much to expect from a concert from this vocalist. The deep interest her first public efforts elicited from them gave occasion to the following certificate. Buffalo, Oct. 30th, 1851. Mr. H. E. Howard. Dear Sir, at your suggestion, for the purpose of enabling Miss Elizabeth T. Greenfield to show to her Philadelphia friends the popularity she has acquired in this city, I cheerfully certify as follows. The concert got up for her was unsolicited on her part, and entirely the result of admiration of her vocal powers by a number of our most respected citizens who had heard her at the residence of Gen Potter, with whose family she had become somewhat familiar. The concert was attended by an audience not second in point of numbers to any given here before, except by Jenny Lind, and not second to any in point of respectability and fashion. The performance of Miss Greenfield was received with great applause, and the expression since, among our citizens generally, is a strong desire to hear her again. Respectfully yours, and 100. G. Raid Wilson. Rochester next extended an invitation for her to visit that city. We copy the invitation. The undersigned, having heard of the musical ability of Miss Elizabeth T. Greenfield of the city of Buffalo, and being desirous of having her sing in Rochester, request that she will give a public concert in this city at an early day, and feel confident that it will afford a satisfactory entertainment to our citizens. Signed, Edwin Scranton, Levi A. Ward, H. A. Brewster, W. H. Perkins, 500, 1000, Dewey Geo, Hart, H. S. Allies, Freeman Clark, Isaac Butts, 500, T. Walbridge, E. Peshin Smith, 50, Kelly, 1000, F. Reynolds, Alex, Grant, W. A. Reynolds, 50, B. Swan, Elias Paul, O. 50, Sheldon, Alex, Mann, George Dutton, Jr., 500, Perrin, James S. Bush, H. P. Stevens, John E. Maury, F. S. Wren, 100, P. Dewing, 50, R. Jerome, 50, P. B. James F. Bush. Rochester, Dec. 6th, 1851. This evening in Corinthian Hall, the anticipated entertainment is to be presented to our music-loving citizens. Curiosity will lead many to attend, to whom the performance of a colored prima donna is a phenomenon at once wonderful and rare. Miss Greenfield has received from all who have heard her the name of being a vocalist of extraordinary power. Speaking of her concert in Buffalo, the Express says, on Monday, parody in all her splendor, sustained by Patti and Strakosch, sung at Corinthian Hall to half a house. Last night Miss Greenfield sang at the same place to a crowded house of the respect, cultivated, and fashionable people of the city. Jenny Lind has never drawn a better house, as to character, than that which listened with evident satisfaction to this unheralded and almost unknown African nightingale. Curiosity did something for her, but not all. She has merit, very great merit, and with cultivation, instruction, she will rank among the very first vocalists of the age. She has a voice of great sweetness and power, with a wider range from the lowest to the highest notes than we have ever listened to. Flexibility is not wanting, and her control of it is beyond example for a new and untaught vocalist. Her performance was received with marked approbation and applause from those who knew what to applaud. It remains now for the citizens of Rochester to give her the commendation of their patronage, and then she is fully afloat. It will not be the first time that the verdict of this city in matters musical has been responded to by the world. The price of tickets is $1, and all must see the propriety of this charge in a singer who has to combat the most crushing and the common contempt of another race, the race, too, from whom she must receive her patronage and support. The Black Swan must contend for the highest prize and sing for the best price, or she falls below even the second rank. It is first among the foremost with her, or a direct consignment to a low level. The consciousness of talent, moreover, will not allow her to put too low an estimate upon her qualifications, and she makes her appeal, therefore, to the generosity of a public who cannot fail to appreciate the peculiar condition in which she is placed. Another city paper says, much has been said and written of this personage since she was introduced to the public as a musical prodigy. All sorts of surmises and conjectures have been indulged in, respecting the claim put forth of her merit, and generally the impression seemed to prevail that the novelty of color and idle curiosity accounted more for the excitement raised than her musical powers. Well, she has visited our place and given our citizens an opportunity of judging for themselves. We are ignorant of music and unqualified to criticize, but a large audience were in attendance at Ringberg Hall last evening. Among those present were our musical amateurs, and we heard but one expression in regard to the new vocalist, and that was wonder and astonishment at the extraordinary power and compass of her voice, and the ease with which she passed from the highest to the lowest notes seemed without an effort. Her first notes of "Where are now the hopes?" startled the whole audience, and the interchange of glances succeeded by thunders of applause at the end of the first verse showed that her success was complete. She was loudly encored, and in response sung the baritone, "When Stars Are in the Quiet Sky," which took down the whole house. We have neither time nor space to follow her through her different pieces. Suffice it to say that there never was a concert given in this town which appeared to give more general satisfaction, and every person we met on leaving the hall expressed their entire approbation of her performance. No higher compliment could be paid to the Swan than the enthusiastic applause which successfully greeted her appearance, and the encore which followed her several pieces. There was a very general expression among the audience that the sable vocalist should give another concert, and at the earnest solicitation of several of our citizens, Carl Wood, her gentlemanly manager, has consented to give another entertainment tomorrow evening, when the Black Swan will give a new program, consisting of some of Jenny Lind's most popular songs. The concert on Thursday evening was what in other cases would have been called a triumph. The house was full, the audience a fashionable one, the applause decided, and the impression made by the singer highly favorable. We can safely say that Miss Greenfield possesses a voice of remarkable qualities, singular for its power, softness, and depth. Of all this, she gave ample evidence in the 12 or more pieces she sang, a feat in itself, giving evidence of great vocal resources. There is a lack of training perceptible, although the Swan sings with great correctness and evident close regard of the notes upon the music sheet. No one can hear her without acknowledging her talents, if that is the right expression, but what is to come of this, we are not advised. A couple of years, severe training is indispensable before she can safely be put before the public on a sure footing. Again, Rochester, Corinthian Hall. This astonishing songstress has made her appearance in Rochester and will sing this evening in Corinthian Hall, the most commodious building in western New York. She ought to have as large a house and as brilliant as any that thronged to hear the Swedish nightingale. We heard the Black Swan more than 2 years ago in Philadelphia and New York, in rooms little adapted to give effect to her performances, but we were, even then, struck with the astonishing compass, power, and clearness of her voice. We understand that since that time, she has applied herself with praiseworthy perseverance and assiduity to the cultivation of her extraordinary powers, and has attained great proficiency in the art, which is evidently the bent of her genius. By her own energy, and unassisted, she has made herself mistress of the harp, guitar, and piano. We are informed that the proceeds of the entertainment this evening are to be wholly appropriated to the completion of her musical education in Paris under the world-famed Garcia. We predict for Miss Greenfield a successful and brilliant future. The Rochester American writes, Corinthian Hall contained a large and fashionable audience on the occasion of the concert by this new candidate for popular favor on Thursday evening. We have never seen an audience more curiously expectant than this was for the debut of this new vocalist. Hardly had her first note fallen upon their ears, however, before their wonder and astonishment were manifest in an interchange of glances and words of approval, and the hearty applause that responded to the first verse she sung was good evidence of the satisfaction she afforded. The aria O Native Scenes was loudly encored, and in response she gave the pretty ballad, When Stars Are in the Quiet Sky. The Salut et la France was one of her most difficult pieces, but was loudly encored, and in response she astonished the audience and called down thunders of applause with the bass of Old Hundred and the baritone of When Stars and 100. The gem of the evening, however, was, like the gloom of night retiring. It was a bold attempt for the Black Swan to sing Do Not Mingle after Jenny Lind and Parodi, but she succeeded in rendering its difficult passages with considerable taste and a good degree of justice. It is in pieces of this kind that her untaught powers come into direct competition with the masterly training and careful cultivation of the artistes above named, and the difference is perceptible. But the voice is there, and with that she is destined, if skillfully taught, to achieve a fame that will be worldwide. Lagport. This extraordinary vocalist, whose performances at Buffalo and Rochester have created so much excitement, will make her appearance before a Lockport audience on Thursday evening next. We cannot speak from personal knowledge of her abilities as a vocalist, but she comes to us with such high endorsements of popular favor that we very cheerfully commend her to our citizens as an artiste of the very highest order of talent, and can safely promise a rich entertainment. The Buffalo Commercial Advertiser says, Miss Greenfield is about 25 years of age and has received what musical education she has in the city of Philadelphia. She is, however, eminently self-taught, possessing fine taste and a nice appreciation, with a voice of wonderful compass, clearness, and flexibility. She renders the compositions of some of the best masters in a style which would be perfectly satisfactory to the authors themselves. Her low or properly bass notes are wonderful, especially for a female voice, and in these she far excels any singing we have ever heard. We learn that this singer, soon to become celebrated, we opine, will give a concert in this city on Thursday next. There is no doubt that the novelty of hearing a colored woman perform the most difficult music with extraordinary ability will give éclat to the concert. All representations unite in ascribing to Miss Greenfield the most extraordinary talents and a power and sweetness of vocalization that is really unsurpassed. Such being the case, as we are bound to believe upon good and abundant evidence, she deserves to receive the attention which is given her. Utica Daily Observer, January 13, 1852. The Black Swan had a crowded house last evening to enjoy her voice and criticize her musical powers. The songs she gave were in the main very difficult of execution and well calculated to test the qualities of the Swan. The manner in which she gave The Last Rose of Summer elicited an encore when she gave a specimen of her notes, which were so supernatural for a feminine as to excite belief that a male biped was usurping her prerogative. The deepest bass of the most wonderful baritone could not surpass it, and the greatest wonder was excited. Kathleen Mavourneen and O Native Scenes were remarkably well sung. The only failure we noticed was on some of the high notes, in pieces requiring very rapid execution, where she seemed to want that faculty of rapid and easy transition, so remarkable in Jenny Lind and Kate Hayes. We doubt not that with proper cultivation, the Black Swan will win the high reputation as a singer, which her remarkable powers should give her. Gratifying evidences of personal affection often found their way to her in letters like the subjoined. Utica, January 13, 1853. Miss Greenfield, I am confident you will pardon the liberty taken in thus addressing you when I tell you of my deep interest in you and of my pleasure in listening to the great powers of voice which God has given you. My father is Gerrit Smith. Being his daughter, how can I but hope that your efforts may be crowned with the most brilliant success? I have a few suggestions to make respecting your dress. You are dressed with great modesty and with much simplicity. Still, there are some things it would be well for you to lay aside. Wear nothing in your hair unless it be a cluster of white flowers in the back. Never wear colored flowers nor flowing ribbons. Let your dress be a plain black silk, high at the back of the neck, and open in front about halfway to the waist. Under this, wear a square of lace, tarlatan, or muslin, doubled and laid in folds to cross over the breast. Wear muslin under sleeves and white kid gloves, always. Dress very loosely. I would advise no whalebones, but perhaps you are not prepared for that reform. In case you should lay them aside, a sack of the same material as the dress would be very pretty to conceal the figure. If you tire of the black silk, a steel color would be a good change, but these two are preferable to all others. Your pocket handkerchief should be unfolded and somewhat tumbled, not held by a point in the center. Perhaps it would be better to have it in your pocket, quite out of sight. The piece of music is enough for the hands. I rejoice in the dignity of your deportment and in the good hours you keep. I have said this much in relation to your dress, because I know how important it is that, in the midst of all the prejudice against those of your color, that your appearance should be strikingly genteel. A word or two about your singing. Native Scenes was particularly sweet, because sung with feeling. Let it be your aim to enter with your whole soul into the spirit of your words. In the last rose of summer, you sang senseless for scentless. It may have been owing to a printer's mistake. Scentless is the true word. With sincere desires for your highest good, believe me. Your friend E.S. 1000, Albany, Jan. 19, 1852, Daily State Register. The Black Swans Concert. Miss Greenfield made her debut in this city on Saturday evening before a large and brilliant audience in the lecture room of the Young Men's Association. The concert was a complete triumph for her, one, too, from a discriminating auditory, not likely to be caught with chaff, and none too willing to suffer admiration to get the better of prejudice. Her singing more than met the expectations of her hearers, and elicited the heartiest applause and frequent encores. She possesses a truly wonderful voice, and considering the poverty of her advantages, she uses it with surprising taste and effect. In sweetness, power, compass, and flexibility, it nearly equals any of the foreign vocalists who have visited our country, and it needs only the training and education theirs have received to outstrip them all. The compass of her marvelous voice embraces 27 notes, reaching from the sonorous bass of a baritone to a few notes above even Jenny Lind's highest. The defects which the critic cannot fail to detect in her singing are not from want of voice or power of lung, but want of training alone. If her present tour proves successful, as it now bids fair to, she will put herself under the charge of the best masters of singing in Europe, and with her enthusiasm and perseverance, which belong to genius, she cannot fail to ultimately triumph over all obstacles, and even conquer the prejudice of color, perhaps the most formidable one in her path. She plays with ability upon the piano, harp, and guitar. In her deportment she bears herself well, and we are told converses with much intelligence. We noticed among the audience Gov. Hunt and his family, both houses of the legislature, state officers, and a large number of our leading citizens. All came away astonished and delighted. Albany, Jan. 20, Albany Express. We predict for this lady a very brilliant career under the judicious management of Carl J. H. Wood, the late efficient manager of the Cincinnati Museum, which was recently destroyed by fire. The colonel possesses tact and talent of the highest order, which eminently qualify him for the high and responsible position he now occupies, and we have no hesitation in saying that Miss Greenfield will reap a golden harvest while she remains in his charge. The Swan leaves here for Boston, and thence to New York, where additional talent is expected to be added in that wonderful pianist, Master Cook, who excited the astonishment and admiration of all who had the pleasure of hearing him last fall in New York. Carl Wood expects to make the tour of Europe next season with the Swan, who will doubtless prove as attractive as any cantatrice that ever appeared before a European audience. Albany, Knickerbocker, Jan. 20, 1852, Tuesday. The concerts of this warbler have been well attended and very satisfactory. She comes before the public under many disadvantages, and the fact that nevertheless she pleases is certainly an indication of merit. Among these disadvantages, we note her color, her undertaking to execute alone a program of 10 or 11 pieces, and such of them as the public see fit to encore, a certain want of tact in the conduct of her concerts, and the barely tolerable support given her by her accompanist. Notwithstanding all these drawbacks, the Swan took everybody by surprise. Her compass is extraordinary, her musical education evidently very limited. But her execution certainly equaled that of many white performers of pretensions, and in some pieces drew out a hearty encore. She was dressed in very good taste, with only a slight display of ribbon. On her next appearance before the public, she should exert her feminine privilege, and insist on being led out like a lady by her accompanist, and not like a ghost he was afraid of. Troy Daily Budget, Saturday, Jan. 17, 1852. We were not able to attend in season to hear the first part, and can therefore only give our impressions of the second. The Swan's voice is certainly one of great sweetness and power, especially in the lower register, but in the upper notes it dwindles into a thinness that is anything but agreeable. This was specially observable in her cadenzas, of which she is rather lavish. Her enunciation is not so good as we had been led to suppose. There is a certain flatness at times in her utterance which betrays her origin, which essentially mars her performances. This we notice particularly in Sound the Trumpet, by Hamel. The bill says, a composer we never have had the pleasure of hearing of before. We suppose Handel was intended. The next piece purports to be Saut et la France, from the opera of the File du Regiment. What kind of a file this was, we were rather dubious, but it certainly suggested rat tails and three corners. In hearing it, however, we recognized the celebrated Salut et la France, which the Swan gave with very good effect. Do not mingle was tamely rendered. That style of music is evidently not her role, and we wonder at her attempting to execute that exquisite morceau. It is one of those gems to which none but a finished artist can do justice. The next piece, O Native Scenes, was admirably done. We cannot say so much of the Banks of Guadalquivir. The time was too slow, thereby destroying much of the spirit which should be infused into it. Perhaps the delicious tones of Madame Bishop in this song, who has made it peculiarly her own, and whose notes still linger in our memory, may have instituted unfavorable comparisons. On the whole, the concert was a good one, and exceeded our expectations. By care and cultivation, the Black Swan will become a vocalist of no mean pretensions, and even now she excels many who modestly herald themselves as musical stars. Jan. 23, from the same. We predict for this celebrated singer a brilliant audience tonight at Harmony Hall, for it is to be undoubtedly the great concert of the season. We understand Lt. Gov. Church and Lady, together with large numbers of both branches of the legislature, also large numbers from Lansingburg and Waterford, are to be there tonight, and in order to secure choice seats, it is necessary to go early, as this will be the last opportunity of hearing a lady that can sing a higher and a lower note than any other public singer that has ever visited us. Carl Wood, her gentlemanly manager, informs us that she goes hence to Boston and New York, and will visit Europe in June. Jan. 24th. The concert was attended by the largest and most genteel audience we have ever seen gathered in this city on a similar occasion. She sang almost every piece with exquisite taste and extraordinary artistic skill. The concert with a new bill will be repeated this evening at Franklin Hall at 712 o'clock. Go away, Northampton. Who cares for Jenny Lind? The Black Swan is in town, stopping at the Hampton House, and is going to favor us with specimens of her extraordinary vocalization. Miss Greenfield's singing. We yesterday had the pleasure of hearing the singer who is advertised in our columns as the Black Swan. She is a person of ladylike manners, elegant form, and not unpleasing, though decidedly African features. Of her marvelous powers, she owes none to any tincture of European blood. Her voice is truly wonderful, both in its compass and truth. A more correct intonation, so far as our ear can decide, there could not be. She strikes every note on the exact center, with unhesitating decision and unerring truth. There is obviously wide room for cultivation, but her singing, apart from the marvel of its ranging from a low bass to the highest treble, is exceedingly pleasing, and we think will take the public, both musical and unmusical, by surprise. We should not, to be sure, think of comparing her with Jenny Lind, nor with anyone else. She is a nondescript, an original. We cannot think any common destiny awaits her. Springfield Daily Post, Jan. 29, 1852. The following testimonial of the success of the Swan in Troy appears in the budget of Saturday evening. The concert was a most flattering triumph of genuine art over latent or patent prejudice. She surprises everyone by the wonderful compass and power of her voice, and though in some pieces her execution is somewhat faulty, full allowance is made for this, when it is remembered that her teacher has been nature alone, and that her opportunities of cultivation have been very limited. Evening Gazette, Boston, Jan. 31, 1852. This new musical star of the West has at last reached this city. If all or half that is said of her musical powers be true, she is surely a wonder of the 19th century. We have not had the pleasure of hearing Miss Greenfield in rehearsal, but gentlemen of excellent musical taste who have heard her, and whose word we have no reason to doubt, assure us that she really possesses a compass of voice truly remarkable. We are glad to perceive that no attempt has been made to represent Miss Greenfield as a celebrated artist, as is usually the case. No such claim has been set up, but quite the contrary. The Swan is truly a child of nature. By reference to our advertising columns, it will be observed that Miss Greenfield will make her first appearance in concert in this city on Tuesday evening next at the Melodeon. The program is named and embraces some of the choicest gems warbled by Jenny Lind and Miss Hayes. Several eminent musical performers will assist the Swan. Daily Evening Traveler, Boston, Jan. 31, 1852. The musical powers of Miss Greenfield are said to be of the most wonderful character. The press in every place where she has appeared in concert are united in singing her praises. Those who have heard her assure us that the compass of her voice is truly remarkable. It is said to embrace 27 notes, reaching from the sonorous bass of a baritone to a few notes above even the highest of Jenny Lind's. With such powers, and with enthusiasm and perseverance corresponding to them, she is destined to take the highest rank in the divine science to which she has devoted herself. The Commonwealth, Boston, Jan. 30, 1852. The Swan has arrived and taken up her quarters at the Revere House. Her first concert will be given at the Melodeon next Tuesday evening. Boston will forfeit all right to the title of the Athens of America if it does not look with keen curiosity after this something new under the sun. Miss Greenfield is alleged to have a voice of greater compass than any singer in this country has yet exhibited. That is one thing new. Another is that without special cultivation, she rivals some of the greatest performers in reading and executing the most difficult music. If this be so, Boston, we think, will not be slow to find out and reward it as it deserves. Evening Transcript, Boston, Jan. 30, 1852. Miss Greenfield has arrived in the city and will give her first concert in Boston at the Melodeon on Tuesday evening next. She gave to a small circle of musical people a specimen of the qualities of her voice yesterday afternoon at the room of Mr. Chickering. Her voice has great power and compass, extending over 4.5 octaves, from lower G in bass to C octave in alt. She is self-taught and has won quite a reputation at the West. Boston Herald, Jan. 30, 1852. The Black Swan, this new representative of the divine art, arrived in town yesterday and took quarters at the Revere House. A gentleman of good musical taste, who was yesterday admitted to a private rehearsal, assures us that Miss Greenfield possesses a remarkable voice. It is exceedingly musical and sweet. Its range and compass are truly astonishing. She played the piano with great skill and accompanied herself. She will make her first appearance before a Boston audience on Tuesday evening next at the Melodeon. The Black Swan sings some of the choicest operatic gems. Scenes that are brightest from the opera of Maritana do not mingle from the opera of La Somnambula N100. There is not a little curiosity to hear this extraordinary woman. Evening Transcript, Boston, Feb. 4, 1852. Miss Greenfield, the Black Swan, made her debut before a Boston audience last evening at the Melodeon. In consequence of the price of the tickets being put at $1, the house was not over 2/3 full. She was well received and most vociferously applauded and encored in every piece. She sings with great ease and apparently without any effort. Her pronunciation is very correct and her intonation excellent. Her voice has a wonderful compass and in many notes remarkably sweet in tone. Her voice needs equalizing, which can be done when put under the tuition of a competent instructor. Her second concert will be given on Thursday evening, when the tickets will be put at 50 cents. At her next concert, she will be assisted by Professor Becht of New York and the great juvenile pianist, Master Cooke, 10 years of age, who has no superior in the country of his years. Boston Evening Traveler, February 5, 1852. The Black Swan's first concert at the Melodeon. The novelty of the circumstances and the curiosity which had been excited by the accounts which had reached us of this colored woman's remarkable vocal powers drew together a much larger audience than could ordinarily have been collected at the high price at which the tickets were sold. As many as 500, probably, were present, and influenced as they were by various expectations and motives, it would be difficult to characterize the marks of applause which were bestowed upon the performer. In respect to the Swan's claims as a vocalist, we do not deem it worthwhile to go into any criticism. Boston Daily Times and Bay State Democrat, February 6, 1852. The Black Swan's second concert at the Melodeon last evening was attended by a large and fashionable audience. Miss Greenfield was evidently in better voice than on the night of her first concert, and it was generally admitted sung better. She was enthusiastically encored several times and enthusiastically applauded in every piece. Professor Becht and his pupil, Master Emile Cooke, executed several pieces upon the piano in excellent taste. Daily Morning News, Lowell, February 7, 1852. We see by the Boston papers that this wonderful vocalist had the best house of the season at the Melodeon on Thursday evening. In fact, so crowded was the hall that a large number of ladies could not gain admission on account of the immense number of people all eager to see and hear the Swan. She had a perfect triumph over all prejudices. Master Cooke made his debut and played the piano forte with a skill that would have done credit to one of the old masters, calling down thunders of applause. Professor Becht has no rival on the piano. The Mercury, New Bedford, February 10, 1852. Rara Avis, the Black Swan. This wonderful vocalist, who seems to be asserting for the African race a position in the musical world, a good deal above the Dandy Jim and Lucy Long school, gives a concert tomorrow evening. She is a remarkable instance of natural talent, and her voice is said to be the most remarkable part of the whole matter, possessing as it does a compass and quality in certain of its notes, absolutely unique. Taunton Daily Gazette, February 12, 1852. This widely celebrated lady will favor the citizens of Taunton with an entertainment at Temple Hall this evening. She will be assisted by Professor Becht and by Master Cooke, both unrivaled pianists, the latter a juvenile prodigy of the musical art. The Swan is acknowledged to possess extraordinary vocal powers, and considering the slight advantages she has enjoyed, She has acquired a wonderful proficiency as an artist. Her history is itself a romance. She is not pure African, but was the child of a Seminole woman. She was born a slave, but manumitted at an early age by her mistress, whose name she bears. She has devoted her whole attention to musical study until she has raised herself to an enviable distinction in the profession. Taunton Daily Gazette, February 13, 1852. The Black Swans sung at the Temple Hall last evening. She was heartily applauded at the close of every piece. Altogether, we think it was the best treat for the money that has been given here. Salem Register, February 9, 1852. Miss Greenfield, whose wonderful vocal powers have been astonishing the musical world recently, is to give a concert at Mechanic Hall in Salem this evening. Her program will be found in another column. On her first appearance in Boston, she was laboring under severe indisposition, contracted at the burning of the Hampton House in Springfield, where she was boarding at the time of its destruction. Salem Advertiser, February 10, 1852. We heard the Black Swan, as she is called, at the City Hall last Saturday evening. We have only 3 things to say of her performance. The first is that she had an excellent house, composed of the most intelligent and enlightened of our citizens. The second, that all who heard her seemed to be exceedingly well pleased with her efforts. Although she does not claim to be, nor her friends on her behalf, that she is an artistic singer, yet the compass of her voice and the sweetness of her notes seem to enchant every auditor. Our last observation is that we were ourselves very much pleased with what we heard, and fully concurred in the justice of the loud applause so frequently bestowed on the occasion. Vox Populi, Lowell, February 13, 1852. The concert of Miss E.T. Greenfield, under the direction of the gentlemanly J.H. Wood, was one of the most successful that has been given to this city for a long time. From the great fame which had preceded the Black Swan, had she not really proved herself what she is, a most remarkable vocalist, there would have been a strong feeling against all concerned. But there has not, within our knowledge, an entertainment of the kind taken place in this city that received such general applause. Her compass of voice is probably greater than that of Parodi, Catherine Hayes, or Jenny Lind, even, but she lacks the artistic power of either. Notwithstanding this deficiency, we presume to say that the audience were better pleased with her singing than they would have been with either of those named above, though perhaps some few would not be willing to acknowledge it. The Black Swan sounds 28 full notes, a qualification accorded to no one before her, and one which most successfully rivals the powers of ventriloquism, which Jenny Lind so successfully introduces in her Echo song. Every piece she sung on Saturday evening was rapturously encored. The song in baritone was listened to with surprise and admiration, many of those present hardly believing it to proceed from her, so much did her deep, sonorous voice resemble that of a male. The second piece of the last part, sung instead of the first, which was loudly encored, and also the last piece, neither of which were on the program, were enthusiastically applauded, and may be regarded as the best pieces sung. At least such is our impression. As we have already remarked, the concert may be pronounced the most successful ever given in this city. The instrumental part, by Professor Becht and Master Cooke, was very able, but the effect was lost in the prevailing enthusiasm for the Swan. The Monitor, Saturday morning, Feb. 14, 1852. This celebrated vocalist, assisted by Prof. H. 100, Becht of Mentz and Mast, C. Emile Cooke, will give one of her charming concerts at the Town Hall this Sat. evening, commencing at 8 o'clock. As this is the only opportunity for hearing the Black Swan, of whom so much has been written, the lovers of song will not fail to be present. The papers in almost every part of New York and New England are filled with encomiums of the performances of this colored Jenny Lind, as she sings some of the best pieces, as sung by Jenny Lind and Catherine Hayes. Don't fail of being present this evening. The Carpetbag, Boston, Feb. 14, 1852. Some people's appetite for gammon is insatiable. Fancying they eat brawn, they often find themselves devouring cats and dogs. This was our thought on Tuesday night as we entered the melodeon, with a fear that we might retire in disgust, as we had done on the previous evening from the exhibition of a clumsy mountebank who had undertaken to ape McAllister. But it was not the case on this occasion of the debut of Miss Greenfield, the Black Swan, so absurdly cognominated. We say absurdly, for swans are never black, neither do they sing. Their modulations are anything but melodious, and their inflections are absolute inflictions. But en import, after a flourish or two upon that poorest of all solo instruments, the pianoforte, by Mr. Perebaugh, a most pleasing performer, upon such imperfect machinery, the dark-faced girl presented herself, and was hailed with plaudits that might have gratified the ambition of the whitest among the queens of song. The auditors, who were brought thither mainly from a desire to ascertain whether such things as had been told could actually be, were at once satisfied on hearing but a few bars from Bishop's charming cavatina, sweetly o'er my senses stealing, that the Black Swan was indeed a rara avis in terris. At the close of her first song, the enthusiasm of the highly respectable and very numerous assemblage seemed to know no bounds. It burst forth with an unappeasable furor, resulting in the reappearance of the songstress, who seated herself at the pianoforte and sang, to her own somewhat simple accompaniment, a slow air in a full, round bass voice that would have been envied by old Meredith himself, who used to sit under London Bridge of a foggy morning that he might catch a cold and sing deeper and deeper still. Her tones probably reached down to G. As represented by the open third string of the violoncello, no male voice could have given utterance to sounds more clearly and strikingly masculine, and people gazed in wonder, as though dubious of the sex of the performer, a doubt that was soon dispelled by the smooth sweetness of the next vocal piece from Norma and by the astonishing height to which the Swan ascended in surmounting and mastering the brilliant and beautiful cantata, like the gloom of night retiring. The Swan is of good figure and form, with a full bust, containing organs more completely adapted to the development of the vocal powers and qualities than those of any other human being, whose voice we ever listened to or tested. Her age is apparently about 25, her complexion not exactly ebony, but approaching it as nearly as the brownest black can possibly do, her features, but slightly modified from the pure African lineaments, retaining the low forehead, the depressed nose, and the expansive mouth, without the bulbous labia. As the lady reader is anxious on the subject of dress, we will say that her principal exterior garment enclosed the whole person excepting the caput. Whether composed of printed delaine or French chintz, we could not examine, but the color of its ground, as near as the gaslights allowed us to determine, was either light blue or green cerulean, or emerald, rather profusely covered with large white flowery figures. Her gloves were of white kid, from which depended a fine 9-shilling linen handkerchief. She wore what appeared to be heavy gold earrings, and her hair, jet black, with the natural wiry curl, was arranged a la Jenny Lind. Her manner and carriage were exceedingly easy and even graceful. The voice of this sable phenomenon possesses most extraordinary properties. Its compass and elasticity are immense, and its tone will bear favorable comparison with that of most, if not all, the public vocalists of the day. She has evidently cultivated but little of the ornamental portion of the art, giving us few or no shakes, nor any chromatic flights, though occasionally a respectable cadenza. Of the second concert, on Thursday evening, we are unable to speak, the managers having seen fit to forget us in the distribution of their complimentary tickets. Our editorial friends in other places may receive similar attentions, that is to say, tickets to the first concert only. They will, of course, in return for such great favors, get their critical notices in type before the next concert takes place, and then find that their services are no longer wanted. Mr. P. Shillaber, the author of Mrs. Partington's Sayings. The Morning Mirror, Providence, R1, Feb. 16, 1852. This noted songstress, who has evinced such an extraordinary musical talent as to surprise and delight the most competent musical critics and appreciating audiences in other cities, gives a grand musical entertainment at Howard Hall this evening, vocal and instrumental, and presents a program which, in point of character and rare attractiveness, cannot fail of calling together a full, fashionable, and refined audience. Besides the talent and the novelty which attaches to Miss Greenfield, the entertainment is to be rendered still more attractive by the presence of Prof. H. G. Becht and his pupil, the great musical prodigy, Master C. Emile Cook, only 10 years of age, considered as without a rival as a juvenile pianist. The concerts of this trio, which have been so ably and successfully prepared by Carl Wood in other cities, give the most unbounded satisfaction, and hundreds of persons at the recent concerts in Boston had to content themselves with only standing room. Miss Greenfield is highly commended by the press throughout the West to the favorable consideration of the lovers of good music. Our musical circles now have in their power to judge of the merits and musical talents of Miss Greenfield, and we look tonight for a general attendance of that class. That she will produce much sensation today on her arrival is fully demonstrated by the general feeling which pervades our community. The Daily Transcript, Worcester, Mass. Feb. 18th, 1852. The Black Swan, this noted songstress, whose extraordinary musical talent has created so much interest and enthusiasm among distinguished musical critics and appreciating audiences in various cities, will give one of her attractive entertainments at Horticultural Hall this evening. The rare talent and the novelty of her performances can hardly fail to draw a large and fashionable audience. In addition to her own efforts to please, she will be assisted by Prof. G. Becht and his pupil. We might fill our paper with complimentary notices of her entertainments, coming from the very highest sources. In Providence, on Monday evening, her concert was very fully attended by a fashionable audience, and she was welcomed with much enthusiasm, being loudly encored at the end of every piece and repeatedly called out. The citizens of Providence were highly delighted with her musical powers and are desirous of a repetition of the concert. This is the only opportunity our citizens will have of listening to Miss Greenfield. The Daily Spy, Worcester, Feb. 19th, 1852. The Black Swan gave her long-expected concert at Horticultural Hall last evening before a large and fashionable audience, and if we can judge of her success by the manifestations of applause which were made by the audience and the opinions of the best judges, there can be no doubt that the high expectations that had been raised by the prestige of her capacities were more than realized. Every piece was vehemently encored, and as the assemblage broke up, every face seemed to beam with satisfaction and delight, as if its owner would say, "I feel it is good to be here." Springfield Daily Post, Feb. 20th, 1852. The skin of the Ethiopian may be changed, and the leopard's spots also, but it can't be rubbed out that the Black Swan is a trump. She took all the tricks last night, winning the game completely. The public, before hearing her, had a very indefinite idea of what she was, but after her first song, there was no longer any doubt. It was amusing to behold the utter surprise and intense pleasure which was depicted upon the faces of her listeners. They seemed to express, "Why, we see the face of a black woman, but we hear the voice of an angel. What does it mean?" It certainly is astonishing, and we were astonished with the rest. Her voice is of extraordinary compass, the tone clear, rich, and full, and the execution very tasteful. Even with the memory of Jenny Lind, Kate Hayes, and Parodi fresh within us, we cannot but record our opinion that Miss Greenfield is a singer of extraordinary merit, who will yet win a fame scarcely second to any cantatrice who has appeared before the world. And with every step she takes in public, we shall look to see fresh laurels upon her ebon brow. The Plain Dealer sat, Feb. 28th, 1852. This songstress gives her second concert tonight. The program contains some admirable selections. Each of the pieces demands a variety of skill, the whole offering a better opportunity to learn the musical capacity of the Swan than was heard at the first concert. That cunning young violinist, Master Lewis, will perform some of his most pleasing melodies. Mr. Becht will preside at the pianoforte. Daily Capital City Fact, Columbus, Ohio, March 3d, 1852. Last evening proved that the Black Swan was all that the journals say of her, and Miss Greenfield stands confessedly before the Columbus world, a swan of excellence. She is indeed a remarkable swan. Although colored as dark as Ethiopia, she utters notes as pure as if uttered in the words of the Adriatic. Columbus, Ohio, March 7th. The concert at Neal's New Hall yesterday evening was fully attended, nearly all the seats being crowded. At the appointed hour, the Black Swan made her entrée, accompanied by Prof. Becht. The audience, quite alive with curiosity before, were not favorably impressed with her personal appearance, but from that fact they were anxious to hear the sound of her voice, which had given her a repute in advance, inferior to that only of many of the best artists. The selections upon the program were all familiar to the audience, and thus, perhaps, enabled the sable cantatrice to challenge comparison with others by the whole audience. The impression left by the first part of the bill was that her voice is one of great depth and reach, as she has been usually described, but not that she possessed in a marked degree either sweetness, pathos, or delicacy, qualities which no cultivation can give, by the way. Her exercises in deep bass developed a power quite monstrous, compared with any other female voice we have ever heard. After the interval, she appeared more assured. Upon the suggestion of another, we listened to her without looking toward her during the entire performance of The Last Rose of Summer, and were at once and satisfactorily convinced that her voice is capable of producing sounds right sweet, and not inferior in regard to any but Jenny Lind and Bishop, neither of whom, we must believe, can ever be surpassed in that quality. The whole of the second part produced effects more in favor of the songstress upon the audience generally. If she is as devoid of professional training as represented, she surely has fine natural advantages as a vocalist. Her personal appearance is, at first, very unfavorable for the stage, and not less so, of course, on account of her color and the utterly inextinguishable prejudice against color and race which she must generally encounter in this country, if not in those over the water. The instrumental part of the performance is excellent, but of it we have not room today to speak. She sings Tomorrow Night, a choice program. Columbus, March 6, 1852. We had the pleasure of listening to this celebrated cantatrice last evening at Neil's New Hall. We have only 3 things to say of her performance. The first is that she was honored with a crowded house, composed of the most intelligent and enlightened of our citizens. Second, that all who heard her were exceedingly well pleased with all her efforts. And third, that notwithstanding it is not claimed, either by herself or friends, that she is an artistic singer, yet the compass of her voice has rarely been equaled, and the sweetness of her notes seemed to enchant every auditor. Philadelphia, March 16th. To Elizabeth Greenfield. Thy letter from Columbus came safely to hand, and it gave me pleasure to hear thee is doing so well, and I hope it may continue until thy return to our city. In answer to thy inquiry about my parents, I am glad to say they are both enjoying good health. Father is still busy by times with the old lady's estate, but it does not, as yet, seem to be near a final settlement. It is true that Mr. Richards has received her money, as it was for services rendered to Aunt Betsy, not from having been left anything in the will. But all the legatees, of which thee is one, will have to wait until the whole business is concluded. It has been very trying and tedious to all concerned, but I hope, ere long, the right thing will be brought about, and thee will then receive what is thy due. Judge Jones has been appointed in J. Bouvier's place, is an able and excellent man, and will no doubt do all he can to hasten the settlement of the whole affair. Thy friend. 500 T. Howell. American House, March 5, 1852. Editor of The Republic. We have been favored this afternoon, together with some ladies, with a private musical entertainment by Miss E. T. Greenfield, known as the Black Swan, and words would fail us to do her voice justice, even were she white. Never having heard the renowned Madame Goldschmidt, we can draw no comparison between the Swan and her fairer Swedish rival. But however she may compare with her, allow us to say she has the most varied and powerful voice it has yet been our fortune to hear. She gave us first the arietta, Where Are Now the Hopes I've Cherished, accompanying her voice with the guitar, which, as well as the harp and piano, she uses very skillfully. This song, though easy of execution, is charmingly sweet and plaintive, and how it could be better performed than upon this occasion, it is difficult to imagine. Every heart present was thrilled with her tones, which flowed from her lips like gems. Next we were favored with a song in bass, accompanied with the piano, in which a male voice was so closely imitated as to defy the most acute ear to make it anything else. A male voice, however, highly refined, deeper, stronger, sweeter than ever before fell upon our ear. The feelings of all present were delightfully stirred. Even the atmosphere in which we sat seemed trembling with emotion. These were followed by other songs, enough to exhibit the vocal charms and operatic talent of this wonderful cantatress in all their strength and compass. And we feel it due to say, though without pretending to rigid musical criticism, while the voice of the swan is equal to the loftiest pitch of the soaring lark and the lowest reach of bass tone, there seems no lack of sweetness and distinctness, so often wanting or underrated in musical entertainments. A word as to the personnel of the swan. She is robust and fleshy, with a full and healthy chest, but with very uncomely features. She is intelligent, however, and unassuming, is free without boldness, and kind and attentive to all who visit her. She was born in Mississippi. Her father was an African, her mother a Choctaw Indian woman, and she seems, both in features and disposition, to show her compound origin. When quite a child, she fell into the hands of quite a wealthy Welsh lady, by whom she was raised in Philadelphia, with whom she ate and slept for 21 years, and who, dying, bequeathed her a handsome property, which is yet contested at law. Her family name is Taylor, but in honor of her mistress, she takes the name of Greenfield. We are told it is her purpose to sail for Europe sometime in June or July next, to avail herself of the best instruction which can be obtained in cultivating her extraordinary vocal gifts. The statement that Miss Greenfield is the daughter of a man in Buffalo who formerly lived in Mississippi and served as hostler, and that Miss G came north and married a fellow yclept Green, is all false. If any person should have been led to believe otherwise, the following letters will be sufficient to undeceive them. N.W. corner of Mulberry and 10th Street, Philadelphia, 11th month 5th, 1851. I have known Elizabeth Greenfield for more than 15 years, during most of which time she resided near to me with a worthy and benevolent friend of mine, the late Elizabeth Greenfield, through whose liberality she was kindly supported and educated. In the course of a professional attendance of some years on Elizabeth's family, I had reason to be convinced that she continued to stand well in the estimation of her aged friend. To the best of my information, her conduct and deportment since have been such as to merit the esteem of those who know her in this city. Signed, Theophilus E. Beasley, 1500, Philadelphia, 11th month 8th, 1852. I have known Eliza Greenfield many years. She came to this city from Mississippi with her late mistress Elizabeth Greenfield when a child, by whom she was much esteemed and who has left her a legacy. I know her to be a free woman, respectable and intelligent. Joseph Howell, Philadelphia, Nov. 17th, 1851. This is to certify that I have known Elizabeth T. Greenfield for many years, and am happy to bear testimony to her worth as a woman and her merits as a singer. She was brought up from a child by Mrs. Greenfield, a wealthy widow lady from Mississippi, with whom she remained until her death, and was ever treated by her with confidence and affection. From the will of Mrs. Greenfield, Elizabeth derives an income sufficient to enable her to resign all occupation, save that pertaining to her profession as a singer. Her associations in life have ever been with the most respectable, and most particularly in connection with the families of Mrs. Greenfield's friends, who esteemed her as an unobtrusive and excellent person. She now seeks public favor as a singer, and although almost entirely self-taught, possesses wonderful power of voice and sweetness of tone, and is well worthy the patronage of all lovers of music. To such we heartily recommend her, trusting that her merits may meet their reward. Mrs. John B. Bispam, Philadelphia, Nov. 18th, 1851. From my long and personal acquaintance with the subject of the annexed short sketch, I accord fully with all contained therein. Mrs. Alfred 1000, Collins. I feel great pleasure in stating I have known Miss Greenfield since she was a year old, and knew Mrs. Elizabeth Greenfield, valued her as a truly deserving and good person, always correct in her deportment, and worthy of respect and confidence. All Mrs. Greenfield's friends can bear testimony to this truth. All my family wish her success wherever she goes in this, her musical profession. Signed, J. E. Tevers, Phil, Nov. 1851, number 410 West Walnut Street. The Plain Dealer, Cleveland, Ohio. The Black Swan is to be in Cleveland on the 26th. The Plain Dealer man says an exchange is so excited about it that he is turning all sorts of colors. OS Journal. Speaking of colors, we own up to something of a mixture, having been born gray, but the true Democrat says that colored people are a little ahead of white people. Plain Dealer, March 26, 1852. The advent of the Black Swan was the signal for prolonged applause. She is a woman of graceful stature, with a face of intelligence and gentleness, modest and tasteful in her dress, and an easy carriage. She looks confidently to the audience, as if trusting to their unbiased judgment. Her first song, Sweetly O'er My Senses Stealing, gives a fair idea of her flexibility and tone. They are truly astonishing. She glides from note to note with the utmost ease, as trippingly as most of our prima donnas. Compass of voice, the most desirable quality in vocal music, is the distinctive feature of her style. Here she is fully at home, as evinced in that charming ballad where she accompanied herself on the piano. Her voice here was masculine and rich, and at the same time soft, devoid of that burr with which most bona fide male voices are encumbered. She sang in 6 pieces, was applauded in each, and thrice triumphantly encored. We heard but one opinion of the entertainment, that of unqualified delight. Milwaukee Daily Sentinel, April 19, 1852. The Telegraph and Press, for some time past, have been busy in chronicling the musical triumphs of the Black Swan and in noting her progress westward. Last week, she sang to crowded and delighted audiences in Detroit, Chicago, Kenosha, and Racine. Tonight she sings at Gardner's Hall in this city. She comes here heralded by a reputation which will of itself draw a full house. That those who attend will enjoy the entertainment will be readily inferred from the following notice in Chicago, copied from the journal of that city. To say they were gratified is not enough. If expression of countenance and repeated applause, more than we ever witnessed upon a similar occasion in this city, mean anything, they were surprised and delighted, not perhaps with the artistic skill she manifested, but the wonderful power, sweetness, and compass of her voice. It was like a flute, a clarion, an organ, and yet it was more a splendid human voice. Her style is simple and unaffected. She is guiltless of all the trickery of the professed and trained vocalist, but sings as she feels it, as she thinks it should be sung, and though not skilled in the quibbles and nomenclature of the art divine, we are satisfied she thinks right. With a complexion not Circassian, and a figure not altogether a model for sculptors, she has drawn together here an audience, has charmed them, and all with the magic of a voice. Milwaukee Sentinel, April 1852. What shall we say? That we were delighted and surprised. All who were present know that, from their own feelings. We can only say that we have never heard a voice like hers, one that, with such ease and with such absence of all effort, could range from the highest to the lowest notes. After singing the first song, she was called back, when she sat down to the piano and commenced, "When Stars Are in the Quiet Sky." We almost imagined at first that Geo. Baker, with his heavy bass voice, had broken forth somewhere in the vicinity. But what was our surprise to discover that those low, yet heavy and powerful notes proceeded from the same person who just before had been singing with the highest, clearest notes of a woman. Thus it was throughout. It seemed as though to sing was as natural to her as to the bird, and she poured forth melody and music without being obliged to use those desperate and convulsive efforts that some do. She was received with the most rapturous applause, which in some of the songs broke forth at the end of every verse. This was especially the case when she sang "If a Body Meet a Body" and 100, when it seemed as though they could not sufficiently testify their pleasure. Professor Becht is a most correct and finished player on the piano, and we must say that Mr. Schmidtroth made more music than we ever heard before in scientific fiddling. Rochester, May 6, 1852. All the lovers of music in Rochester will be glad to learn that Miss Greenfield intends to give a concert in Corinthian Hall on Monday next. This gifted songstress has been having a series of very successful concerts in Ohio and other states, and we predict for her a large audience on Monday. The magnificent quality of her voice, its great power, flexibility, and compass, her self-taught genius, energy, and perseverance, combined to render Miss Greenfield an object of uncommon interest to musicians. We have been spellbound by the ravishing tones of Patti, Sontag, Malibran, and Grisi. We have heard the wondrous warblings of the nightingale, and we have listened with delight to the sweet melodies of the fair daughter of Erin. But we hesitate not to assert that, with 1 year's tuition from the world-famed Emmanuel Garcia, Miss Greenfield would not only compare favorably with any of the distinguished artists above named, but incomparably excel them all. We hoped, ere this, to hear of Miss Greenfield proceeding to England. Queen Victoria is a thorough judge of music, and a kind and generous patron to musicians. Miss Greenfield's complexion would not bar her entrance to Buckingham Palace, nor would it shock the nerves of the most delicate lady of the court there. The Black Swan should sail to Europe. The Globe, Toronto, May 12-15, 1852. Anyone who went to the concert of Miss Greenfield on Thursday last, expecting to find that he had been deceived by the puffs of the American newspapers, must have found himself most agreeably disappointed. Mr. Becht, the pianist of the party, commenced the evening with a very brilliant performance, which showed that his talents, if not of the very first rank, nearly approached to that point. He has a very considerable share of taste, but his forte passages were the finest and were warmly applauded. After he had retired, there was a general hush of expectation to see the entrance of the vocalist of the evening, and presently there appeared a lady of a decidedly dark color, rather inclined to an embonpoint, and with African formation of face. She advanced calmly to the front of the platform and courtesed very gracefully to the audience. There was a moment of pause, and the assembly anxiously listened for the first notes. They were quite sufficient. The amazing power of the voice, the flexibility and the ease of execution took the hearers by surprise, and the singer was hardly allowed to finish the verse ere she was greeted with the most enthusiastic plaudits, which continued for some time. The higher passages of the air were given with clearness and fullness, indicating a soprano voice of great power. The song was encored, and Miss Greenfield came back, took her seat at the piano, and began, to the astonishment of the audience, a different air in a deep and very clear bass or baritone voice, which she maintained throughout, without any very great appearance of effort or without any breaking. She can, in fact, go as low as Lablache and as high as Jenny Lind, a power of voice perfectly astonishing. It is said she can strike 31 full clear notes, and we could readily believe it. After the surprise had subsided, there was time to find out the errors and defects. It must be confessed that Miss Greenfield has a very heedless way of throwing her beautiful notes about, has far from perfect command over them, and wants the knowledge of ornamental points, which can only be given by instruction from the best masters. There were plenty evidences that it was not from lack of ability to understand what was required that these defects existed. The introduction of the deeper voice in the treble songs was a singularity, but was also an unpleasing offense against the ear. Miss Greenfield is said to have great facility in acquiring the knowledge of music, and will certainly, under proper tuition, become distinguished. The company tonight perform in Hamilton. We hope on their return we may have another opportunity of listening to Miss Greenfield's wonderful strains and Messrs. Becht and Schmidroth's excellent instrumentalization. Auburn, New York, May 21st, 1852. This evening, the citizens of Auburn are to have the pleasure of witnessing the vocal powers of the Black Swan. It is not a year since this candidate for public patronage made her appearance in the concert room, but yet she has won a reputation that everywhere secures her crowded houses. Her recent tour in the Western States was eminently successful, and her concerts were referred to in the papers as being equal in interest to those given by the most celebrated vocalists of the day. The entertainment this evening will be given at Markham Hall. Auburn, May 22d, 1852. We have no hesitation in saying that, but for the prejudice which exists against caste, she would attain great eminence. We trust she will succeed. Mr. Schmidroth, the violinist, displays great musical capacity and taste, but we are surprised that so perfect an artist should trust his success to so imperfect an instrument. Mr. Becht, the pianist, is a man of talent and has great command of his instrument. Syracuse, May 24th, 1852. Notwithstanding the many distinguished and justly celebrated songstresses now in our country, the Black Swan continues to be heard with great favor by the musical portion of the community. Utica, May 26, 1852. Those who failed to hear this extraordinary vocalist on her previous visit to Utica will not fail to gratify their curiosity at this time. Miss Greenfield has now had the advantage of several months' training and practice, and of appearing at concerts in most of the principal northern cities. Her natural endowments surpass anything in the way of human voice we ever heard, and her singing is pleasing as well as astonishing. She is now accompanied by Becht, the pianist, and Schmittroth, the violinist, artists, as we hear, of talent and merit from the city of New York, and occupying the first position in their profession. Watertown, May 28, 1852. This celebrated cantatrice, on her return from a very successful tour in the West, gives one concert in this city, in Malcolm Hall, this evening. The Swan has sung in our city on a previous occasion, and her merits are pretty generally known, though we are assured that she has made great proficiency since that time. Malcolm Hall ought to be crowded this evening. Ogdensburg, June 2, 1852. The Swan's second concert, which came off last evening, was quite as largely attended as the first, and we noticed, particularly, that the patronage of those who attended on the former evening was largely drawn upon. The same manifestations of delight at the performance of the several artists were apparent with the audience of last evening, and many who had come to listen for the second time were inspired with a more accurate appreciation of the Swan's merits. The troupe proceed hence to Burlington. She goes to Europe soon for the purpose of receiving instruction from the best masters. Burlington, June 4, 1852. The concert at Concert Hall last evening delighted one of the largest and most select audiences ever assembled in Burlington. Miss Greenfield was received with much enthusiasm. It was, altogether, the best concert ever given in this place. We learn that tonight is positively her last in Burlington. Greenfield, June 21, 1852. Altogether the most artistic performance in the sphere of music we recollect ever having attended in this town was given on Thursday evening by Miss Elizabeth Greenfield, alias the Black Swan. Her voice possesses wonderful compass, is very rich, and is skillfully trained. She is a most surprising vocalist, considered in whatever respect. The violin performance, by Mr. Schmittroth, brought out tones more astonishing than people in general supposed pine, catgut, and rosin capable of producing. The whole entertainment was in the highest degree respectable and worthy of any audience in the world. Brattleboro, VT, June 23, 1852. The Black Swan, or Miss Elizabeth Greenfield, sang in Mr. Fisk's beautiful new hall on Wednesday evening last, to a large and intelligent audience. We had seen frequent notices in our exchanges, and were already prepossessed in favor of the abilities and life purposes of our sable sister. But after all, we must say that our expectations of her success are greater than before we had heard her sing, and conversed with her in her own private room. She is not pretty, but plain for a colored woman. Still she is gifted with a beauty of soul, which makes her countenance agreeable in conversation, and in singing, especially when her social nature is called into activity, there is a grace and beauty in her manner which soon make those unaccustomed to her race forget all but the melody. We learned from her that she was trained by an old lady belonging to the Society of Friends. Her mistress, being a friend, Elizabeth took lessons in music privately. With only her wages to aid her, she was rapidly acquiring knowledge in music in imitation of her mistress, young relatives, when someone maliciously informed her mistress, with the expectation of seeing an injunction laid upon her self-culture. The old lady sent for Elizabeth, who came trembling into her presence, expecting to be reprimanded for her pursuit of an art forbidden by the Friends' discipline. "Elizabeth," said the old lady, "is it true that thee is learning music, and can play upon the guitar?" "It is true," she replied. "Go, bring thy guitar, and let me hear thee sing." Elizabeth did so, and when she had concluded her song was astonished to hear her mistress say, "Elizabeth, whatever thee wants, thee shall have." From that time her mistress was the patroness of her earnest efforts for skill and knowledge in musical science. Nature has done more for Miss Greenfield than any musical prodigy we have met, and art has marred her execution less. From New England, Miss Greenfield returned to Buffalo to enjoy a season of rest and refreshment. She remained here several months, during which time she received 2 definite proposals to accept an engagement, one to travel for 3 months in the United States, the other, which she accepted, to proceed directly to Europe. Cleveland Deck, 1852. Miss Greenfield, dear Madam, I take the liberty to address a few lines to you on the subject of giving concerts. I have understood you to have no engagement at present, and that you would be glad to make an engagement with a person competent to manage. I have had considerable experience in the business, and feel myself competent to take the management of business of this nature. I have traveled with Jenny Lind during her engagement with P.T. Barnum. I have also been connected with Mr. Barnum for several years, and if you feel disposed to engage with me, I would refer you to Mr. Barnum. He is now at his residence in Bridgeport, Con. I should propose to travel through such portions of the States as you have not visited, and should feel disposed to commence in New York. Mr. Barnum is a relation of mine, and I could give a series of concerts in New York in his name. At least, I feel quite confident I could do so. I am a man of family, and am living in this city. I am acquainted with Major Dunn, Carl Wood, and slightly with Mr. Ladd, formerly of your troop. Please let me hear from you by return of mail, and oblige. Yours, E.T.N. Cleveland, Feb. 23, 1853. Mr. Howard, dear sir, if Miss Greenfield would accept an engagement for 3 months to travel in the interior of this and adjoining states, I should like to give it a trial. If we undertake it and are successful, I should like to give a series of concerts in New York after the opening of the World's Fair and probably make a second engagement. Please consult with Miss Greenfield and let me know her mind. If she accepts, everything will be done to make it pleasant for her. I will come to Buffalo and settle preliminaries on hearing from you. I have letters of recommendation from Mr. Barnum, which I do not deem necessary to send you, as you saw Mr. Barnum in New York so recently. Truly yours, E.T.N. The second overture she accepted, and the following agreement was drawn up. Copy. This agreement made the 16th day of Feb. 1853, between, of the city of New York, of the first part, and Miss Elizabeth T. Greenfield, now of the city of Buffalo, of the second part, witnesseth, that the said parties of the first and second parts do hereby agree, each with the other, as follows. The party of the second part hereby agrees to perform a musical tour throughout England, Scotland, and Ireland, and upon the continent of Europe, and the free states of the United States, and deliver concerts, public and private, at such times and places, when her health will permit, as shall be directed by the party of the first part, not exceeding 3 times in any 1 week, and she agrees that she will, as far as possible, strive to give satisfaction in her concerts. The party of the first part is to have the management and direction of the business, and everything relating thereto. He is to advance all the money which may be required in carrying on the enterprise. He is also to advance to the party of the second part such money as she may require for her own individual expenses. He is also to have the direction of the musical instruction of the party of the second part, and at all times to treat her respectfully, and provide suitable board, lodging, and traveling accommodations for herself and attendant. A competent secretary shall be employed by the party of the first part, whose business it shall be to keep true accounts of the receipts of money at such concerts, and of all the expenditures made on account of the enterprise, which accounts shall at all times be open to the inspection of both parties. No agents are to be employed in the said business, except such as shall be specially attached to the troop, and such as shall be necessary to promote the objects of the enterprise, unless it shall be considered for the interest of both parties to employ additional assistance, in which event the compensation of such additional assistance shall be paid as a general charge. The party of the second part is to have the privilege of selecting her own maid, whose services and expenses are to be paid out of the monies received from such concerts, such wages not exceeding $6 a month, in case she shall select her own maid. all the expenses incurred in the said business, including the furnishing of such wardrobes as shall be mutually agreed upon, the individual expenses of both the parties, the musical instruction of the party of the second part, and the expenses of the party of the second part back to New York, are to be paid out of the receipts of such concerts, and the overplus is to be divided between the parties as follows: to the party of the first part 4/5, to the party of the second part 1/5. The amount which shall at any time be due to the party of the second part for her share in the profits shall be paid to her on demand. In case of the death of the party of the first part before the expiration of the time herein limited, the party of the second part is to go on in the same manner under the direction and management of his legal representatives, but in all respects under the conditions of this agreement, and such legal representative is to perform all the acts and things which the party of the first part is to perform under the conditions of the agreement. In case of the death of the party of the second part, this agreement is then to terminate, and the party of the first part shall render a true and correct account of the receipts and expenditures relating to the said business, and pay over whatever money shall remain in his hands belonging to the party of the second part, to Hiram E. Howard, now of the city of Buffalo, whose receipt therefore shall be binding upon her heirs and personal representatives. And it is mutually agreed by and between the said parties that they will, during the time herein limited, unless prevented by illness or other inevitable accident, diligently and faithfully devote himself and herself in and about the said business, and the management thereof, and the carrying on the same, and the affairs and business thereof, for the promoting the same for the best advantage and benefit of both the said parties. This agreement is to commence on the 10th day of March next, and terminate on the 1st of May 1855, and the said party of the second part agrees to be in the city of New York on the said 10th day of March next, health permitting, and subject to the direction of the said party of the first part, as before mentioned. In case the party of the first part shall for any reason wish at any time, after they shall arrive in Europe, to dissolve this agreement, he is at liberty to do so upon conditions that he shall pay her the balance that may then be due to her, and shall in addition thereto pay her a sum of money sufficient to pay the expenses of herself and servant back to the city of New York in a respectable manner. Witness the hands and seals of the parties, the day and year first above written. Signed, G.O. Davis, Buffalo, witness, and executed by R. 50S. Elizabeth T. Greenfield, 50S. State of New York, Buffalo, Mayor's Office, April 1, 1853. I do hereby certify that a contract, of which the foregoing is a copy, is deposited for safekeeping with Hiram E. Howard, Esquire, of this city, by Miss Greenfield. In witness thereof I have hereunto set my hand, and affixed the seal of the city of Buffalo the day and the year last above written. Eli Cook, Mayor of the city of Buffalo. At this period, she received the following communication. Buffalo, February 23, 1853. Having learned that Miss Greenfield is about to visit Europe on a musical tour, as well as with a view to the artistic improvement of her vocal powers, the undersigned take this opportunity of tendering to her a complimentary benefit prior to her departure, as a testimonial in favor of her unprecedented natural powers of voice, and also as an earnest of the due appreciation by our fellow citizens generally of the liberal aid rendered by her on a former occasion to one of the most worthy objects of charity in our city, and we trust that the announcement of a concert by Miss Greenfield will be responded to by a full house on the occasion. H. E. Howard, James Hollister, Geo. Coit 1000, J. Cadwallader, Henry W. Rogers, G. B. Rich, A. J. Rich, E. S. Scudding, E. P. Beals, Ira Osbury, Matthew Wilson, Nelson Randall, G. S. Hazard, H. B. Potter, A. Ramsey, S. S. Gosson, Joss, G. Mastra, Samuel F. Pratt, 100, F.S. Thomas, Hiram Barton, H. J. M. Say, Geo. W. Houghton, James Wadsworth, William Webster, Geo. 100, White, W. M. Fisk, Edwin Thomas, W. M. Carlin, Geo. Davis, Cyrus P. Lee, G. W. Rounds, T. 1000, Parmalee, Lewis, 100, Hodges, H. N. Loomis, H. 100, Walker 100, E. Young 50, R. Plimpton Jas 50, Reynolds W.M. A. Seaver. The concert took place the 7th of March, 1853. The success of this concert may be inferred from the following note. Buffalo, March 8, 1853. To Miss Elizabeth T. Greenfield. I was at your concert last night, and cannot withhold my meed of praise, or refrain from mentioning to you the immense delight it afforded me to hear so truly a magnificent voice, as that which the good Creator has bestowed upon you. It did indeed come sweetly o'er my senses stealing. If I was enchanted with your Entreat Me Not, and enraptured with the aria from Garcia, how perfectly amazed was I at the basso of the Rover's song. I trembled for you, thinking every moment that you should fail, while at the same time I knew that one of the chief charms of your voice is the perfect ease and freedom from effort which you appeared to possess. There is one thing which Miss Greenfield must allow a stranger to suggest, and it is on the subject of her dress. The dress itself was handsome, but why wear that white lace, Bertha? Some bright rich color would suit so much better, or something darkly delicate. Indeed, before a European audience, I think Miss Greenfield might adopt the Oriental style of dress with the best effect. Hoping, then, for Miss Greenfield the utmost success in her projected European tour, I remain her obedient well-wisher, G. Laden with all these good wishes and hopes, Miss G bade farewell to her Buffalo friends and proceeded to New York City, preparatory to her embarkation. In New York, Miss Greenfield had many apprehensions. At Buffalo she had become acquainted with Madame Alboni, who greatly admired her voice and gave her many useful instructions. Upon her arrival in this city, she learned that Madame Alboni had an engagement at the Niblo Gardens. Some friends desired to procure for her a private box at the Italian Opera, where she might have the pleasure and advantage of hearing, undisturbed, this famous songstress, but it was refused her. Nevertheless, her first concert took place at the Metropolitan Hall on Thursday, March 31st, 1853, in the presence of 4,000 people. Subsequently, the following publication was placed in her hand. New York, April 2d, 1853. Miss Elizabeth T. Greenfield. Madam, by the suggestion of many enthusiastic admirers of your talents, I have been induced to address you on the subject of another and second concert, prior to your departure for Europe. Your Advent musical in Gotham has not been idly heralded among the true lovers of song and admirers of exalted genius, of which your unprecedented success on Wednesday evening must have sufficiently convinced you, while all are eloquent in the commendation of your superior powers and engaging method. Confiding, madam, in your reported magnanimity and generosity to oblige, I will divest myself of tedious circumlocution and fervently exhort you to make a second exhibition of your skill, which, there can be no doubt, will be highly successful to you and as interesting to your admirers. The public. Miss Greenfield embarked from New York in a British steamer for England April 6, 1853, and arrived at Liverpool the 16th of April, 1853, rested over the Sabbath, and proceeded Monday morning to London, in which metropolis she became safely domiciled on the evening of the same day. But painful trials awaited her from a quarter the most unexpected. The individual with whom she had drawn up the contract for this musical tour was unfaithful to his promises, and she found herself abandoned, without money and without friends, in a strange country. She had been told Lord Shaftesbury was one of the great good men of England, and she resolved to call upon him in person and entreat an interview. His lordship immediately granted her request, listened patiently to her history, and directly gave her a letter of introduction to his lawyer. The following letter from one of her early friends in Buffalo will relate some of the incidents of her trial. Buffalo, July 29, 1853. Friend Elizabeth, I have just received your letter of the 25th, and we are all pleased to hear of your good health and improvement in music. I have received 2 letters before from you, the first with your likeness, and the other with the box of presents for Julia Palmer and the children, all of whom were much pleased with them. My health has not been good this summer, and when I have thought of writing to you, My mind has been so confused that I found it impossible to say on paper what I wanted to. I know you must think strange of it, but I know, too, that you will not think we have forgotten you, or that we have ceased to feel a deep interest in your welfare and future success. I think Mr. is not acting right by you, and I wish you had some disinterested friend to stand by you and make him do as he ought. I received a letter yesterday from Mr. Spooner. He says Antonio has returned to New York and tells bad stories of. If they are true, you ought to call him to account. Antonio says, would not advance you money to pay your doctor's bill. This he had no right to refuse, whether you have made money or not. And if he refuses to advance you anything which you require for your health, comfort, or respectability, he breaks the contract, and you are at liberty to do better if you can. It would do no good for me to write to, and it might do you harm. When you left New York, I expected Mrs. Howard's brothers would be in England when you arrived there, and I calculated upon their selecting for you some person to act as your friendly adviser in case of need. But they returned earlier than I expected, and arrived in New York about the time you landed at Liverpool. Under these circumstances, I see no way for you but to do right yourself, and trust that some distinguished friend will be raised up to you, who has influence and discretion, and who will be willing to tell you what is best, and will stand up as your protector and defender in case of need. And it seems to me that such one can be found among your numerous patrons. I know well your honest heart, and I know too that you would rather suffer wrong than do wrong. But it is necessary to you that you be respected, and if he will not give you money for your necessary expenses, he is cheating you, and if he cheats you now, he will continue to do so. Now I would advise you to select some person in whom you have confidence, show him this letter, and then do just what he shall advise. You will see by the contract that is bound to let you have money for all necessary expenses, whether you make money or not, and he is bound to keep a secretary whose business, among other things, is to show you at all times how your account with Mr. stands as regards receipts from concerts and 100 and expenses paid out for the same. If you cannot do this, I would advise you to leave him anyway. In selecting a friend to advise you, be careful and not select one who has any interest in deceiving you or who would advise you to do any dishonorable act towards Mr. or anyone else, for I would rather see you return a beggar than with the name of dishonor or meanness of any kind. If acts fairly by you, do the same to him, whether you make money or not. And this I know you will do if you can determine what is right. My health is now improving, and I feel quite myself again. Mrs. Howard and the children have been quite well since you left, and your baby is growing finely. It begins to say pa, pa, and mama, and stands by the sofa and chairs, but you won't know it when you return, for its hair is losing its curl and becoming somewhat the color of my own. We still call her Greenfield, although some of Mrs. Howard's would-be friends are much shocked at it. However, Mrs. Howard says you took good care of it when she was not able to, and she thinks the name just as good as the care you gave it. Sarah is improving rapidly in her music, and both she and Mary are making good progress at school. Monsieur and Madame St. Kenny often ask about you, as well as many other of your old friends. You must keep yourself prudent and discreet, and you will find in England many who will not see you wronged. But I trust that will do right by you, and that you will not have occasion to tax the good offices of any kind friends that may be made by you while away from your native land. Mrs. Howard and the children send their kindest remembrance and regards to yourself and Anna. Write to me every week, that I may know how you are getting along, and as my health is improving, I will write to you as often as I think it will be of benefit to you. Truly, your friend, H.E. Howard. P.S. Should you have any trouble with, and need the original of your contract, I can send it to you by some of the steamers in a short time. H.E.H. It may perhaps be considered a providential concurrence that Mrs. Harriet Beecher Stowe was in London this same time with Miss Greenfield. We notice in her sunny memories, under the date of May 6th, the following remarks: a good many calls this morning. Among others came Miss Greenfield, the so-called Black Swan. She appears to be a gentle, amiable, and interesting young person. She was born the slave of a kind mistress, who gave her everything but education, and dying left her free with a little property. The property she lost by some legal quibble, but she had, like others of her race, a passion for music, and could sing and play by ear. A young lady, discovering her taste, gave her a few lessons. She has a most astonishing voice. 100. Sat down to the piano and played while she sung. Her voice runs through a compass of 3 octaves and a fourth. This is 4 notes more than Malibran's. She sings a most magnificent tenor, with such a breadth and volume of sound, that with your back turned, you could not imagine it to be a woman. While she was there, Mrs. S. 100. Hall of the Irish Sketches was announced. I told her of Miss Greenfield, and she took great interest in her and requested her to sing something for her. 100. Played the accompaniment, and she sung Old Folks at Home, first in a soprano voice, and then in a tenor or baritone. Mrs. Hall was amazed and delighted, and entered at once into her cause. She said she would call with me and present her to Sir George Smart, who is at the head of the Queen's musical establishment, and of course, the acknowledged leader of London musical judgment. In the course of the day I had a note from Mrs. Hall, saying that as Sir George Smart was about leaving town, she had not waited for me, but had taken Miss Greenfield to him herself. She writes that he was really astonished and charmed at the wonderful weight, compass, and power of her voice. He was also as well pleased with the mind in her singing and her quickness in doing and catching all that he told her. Should she have a public opportunity to perform, he offered to hear her rehearse beforehand. Mrs. Hall says, this is a great deal for him, whose hours are all marked with gold. Again, Mrs. Stowe says, today the Duchess of Sutherland called with the Duchess of Argyll. Miss Greenfield happened to be present, and I begged leave to present her, giving a slight sketch of her history. I was pleased with the kind and easy affability with which the Duchess of Sutherland conversed with her, betraying by no inflection of voice, and nothing in her air or manner, the great lady talking with the poor girl. She asked all her questions with as much delicacy, and made her request to hear her sing with as much consideration and politeness, as if she had been addressing anyone in her own circle. She seemed much pleased with her singing, and remarked that she should be happy to give her an opportunity of performing in Stafford House, as soon as she should be a little relieved of a heavy cold which seemed to oppress her at present. This, of course, will be decisive of her favor in London. The Duchess is to let us know when the arrangement is completed. I never so fully realized, continues Mrs. Stowe, that there really is no natural prejudice against color in the human mind. Miss Greenfield is a dark mulatress of a pleasing and gentle face, though by no means handsome. She is short and thick-set, with a chest of great amplitude, as one would think on hearing her tenor. I have never seen in any of the persons to whom I have presented her the least indications of suppressed surprise or disgust, any more than we should exhibit on the reception of a dark-complexioned Spaniard or Portuguese. Miss Greenfield bears her success with much quietness and good sense. Her Grace, the Duchess of Sutherland, afterward became her ever unfailing supporter and adviser. It became painfully necessary for Miss Greenfield to take the procedure expressed in the following legal notice, although the bare presentation of the document did not take place until Jan. 12, 1854. To Mr. 29 George Street, Hanover Square, London. Sir, the salary of £5 per week, payable by you to me under our agreement, bearing date the 21st day of October, 1853, being in arrears and unpaid for more than 5 weeks last past, though repeated applications have been made to you for payment thereof, and the amount now owing to me by you having been demanded, and default being made in payment of the same, and there being other breaches on your part of the agreement made between us, I do hereby, in pursuance of the power or authority given to me by the said agreement, bearing date the 21st day of October, 1853, and of all other powers and authorities enabling me thereto, give you notice that I do hereby cancel the said agreement, bearing date as aforesaid, and also the agreement dated the 16th day of February, 1853, respectively made between you of the one part, and myself of the other part, and do hereby declare that the said agreements, respectively, shall be, and become absolutely void on the giving of this notice to you, but without prejudice to my rights and remedies for the recovery of any money that may now be due to me, under or by virtue of the said agreement, or either of them. I am, sir, your obedient servant, Elizabeth Tay Greenfield. The pianoforte which previously had been furnished Miss G to practice upon was taken from her. The Duchess of Sutherland, upon learning the fact, immediately directed her to select one from Broadwood's. Her Grace, from whom good acts seem constantly to emanate, permitted her to choose one valued at 60 guineas. Arrangements being completed for a concert at the Stafford House, the following announcement at the same time was made to the British public. 27 Margaret Street, Cavendish Square. The Black Swan, in appealing to the generosity of the British public, assures them that the primary object of her visit to Europe is to accomplish herself in the science of music, which professional friends earnestly counsel her to pursue, and which she embraces con amore with the confident hope that, by the exercise of her vocal faculties in a more cultured form, she may be able to achieve the great object of her life. She is sensible of the philanthropic spirit of the people of Great Britain and feels confident that they will receive her appeal with that kindness and forbearance that ever characterizes them in the cause of true humanity. The Black Swan, therefore, has the honor of informing the nobility, gentry, and public that she will shortly appear at a grand concert, the particulars of which will be announced under distinguished patronage. Elizabeth Tay Greenfield. London, May 1853. We cannot refrain from quoting Mrs. Stowe's description of the concert after dinner at the Stafford House. The concert room was the brilliant and picturesque hall I have before described to you. It looked more picture-like and dreamy than ever. The piano was on the flat stairway just below the broad central landing. It was a grand piano, standing end outward and perfectly banked up among hothouse flowers so that only its gilded top was visible. Sir George Smart presided. The choicest of the elite were there, ladies in demi-toilet and bonneted. Miss Greenfield stood among the singers on the staircase and excited a pathetic murmur among the audience. She is not handsome, but looked very well. She has a pleasing dark face, wore a black velvet headdress and white cornelian earrings, a black moire antique silk made high in the neck, with white lace falling sleeves and white gloves. A certain gentleness of manner and self-possession, the result of the universal kindness shown her, sat well upon her. Chevalier Bunsen, the Prussian ambassador, sat by me. He looked at her with much interest. "Are the race often as good-looking?" he said. I said, "She is not handsome compared with many, though I confess she looks uncommonly well today." The singing was beautiful. 6 of the most cultivated glee singers of London sang, among other things, "Spring's delights are now returning," and "Where the bee sucks, there lurk one." The Duchess said, "These glees are peculiarly English." Miss Greenfield's turn for singing now came, and there was profound attention. Her voice, with its keen, searching fire, its penetrating, vibrant quality, its timbre, as the French have it, cut its way like a Damascus blade to the heart. It was the more touching from the occasional rusticities and artistic defects, which showed that she had received no culture from art. She sung the ballad, "Old Folks at Home," giving one verse in the soprano and another in the tenor voice. As she stood partially concealed by the piano, Chevalier Bunsen thought that the tenor part was performed by one of the gentlemen. He was perfectly astonished when he discovered that it was by her. This was rapturously encored. Between the parts, Sir George took her to the piano and tried her voice by skips, striking notes here and there at random, without connection, from D in alto to a first space in bass clef. She followed with unerring precision, striking the sound nearly at the same instant his finger touched the key. This brought out a burst of applause. Lord Shaftesbury was there. He came and spoke to us after the concert. Speaking of Miss Greenfield, he said, "I consider the use of these halls for the encouragement of an outcast race, a consecration. This is the true use of wealth and splendor when they are employed to raise up and encourage the despised and forgotten." When Mrs. Stowe's account of the concert was read to Miss Greenfield, she remarked, "I should have looked well to the lady, for the black moire antique silk in which I was clad was the gift of Mrs. Stowe and made under her own direction. It cost her $75. Mrs. Stowe's sympathy seemed ever to have followed her with a watchful care. We find this interesting letter among her papers of this date. "My dear Miss Greenfield, I am sorry I cannot see you before I leave town, but I give you in parting my best wishes. Enclosed you will find the bill for your dress and other things receipted. The receipt you had better keep, lest by some mistake you be called upon to pay the bill by and by. Such mistakes sometimes happen. And now, my dear friend, I hope that you will endeavor always, first of all things, to do what is right. Trust in your Heavenly Father and Divine Savior, read the Bible daily, and strive to know His will. Do not spend your Sundays in idleness or folly, but go regularly to church, and try to profit by what you hear. I trust that you will read in this little book the text for each day, and I pray God to bless you. There are a great many temptations in a life like yours, but if you pray to God, He will be your Father and help you always to do right and make your way plain before you. Let me beg of you to be careful as to your dress. Do not dress low in the neck, do not try for showy colors, but keep a plain, modest, respectable style. It was for this purpose that I furnished you with a suit. These things are very important for one in your position, and if rightly managed, will secure for you respect. In your manners, be just as simple as you always have been. Don't put on anything, don't try to pass for anything but what you really are, and you will keep the friends that you have made. I hope to hear good accounts of you when I return. Your true and affectionate friend. Signed, H.B. Stowe. If you wish to write to me, carry the letter to Sampson Low, 47 Ludgate Hill, and he will send it to me. I shall be glad to hear from you. H.B.S. At the presentation of the inkstand by the ladies of Surrey Chapel to Mrs. Stowe, Miss Greenfield was present and sang some songs. At the Stafford House, Mrs. Stowe showed to her Grace a note which Miss Greenfield had sent for her to correct. The Duchess said, "Oh, give it me. It is a great deal better as it is. I like it just as she wrote it." Mrs. Stowe thinks people always like simplicity and truth better than finish. Tuesday, May 31, 1853. Miss Greenfield's first public morning concert took place at the Queen's Concert Rooms, Hanover Square. She came out under the immediate patronage of Her Grace, the Duchess of Sutherland, Her Grace the Duchess of Norfolk, and the Earl and Countess of Shaftesbury. It commenced at 3 o'clock and terminated at 5. Mrs. Stowe says Miss Greenfield did very well and was heard with indulgence, though surrounded with artists who had enjoyed what she had not, a life's training. "I could not but think," remarks Mrs. Stowe, "what a loss to art is the enslaving of a race which might produce so much musical talent. Had Miss Greenfield had culture equal to her voice and ear, no singer of any country could have surpassed her. There could be even associations of poetry thrown around the dusky hue of her brow were it associated with the triumphs of art." The following is the bill of her second grand concert at the Queen's Concert Rooms, Hanover Square. She was assisted by the following eminent artists: